Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth, and the sound of mariachi music drifting over Karen's fence. She'd spent the week documenting every possible violation. Construction noise before 8 a.m., documented. Contractors parking in the street, photographed. And what appeared to be a sound system that surely exceeded noise ordinance limits, measured with her new decibel meter app. But nothing had prepared her for the spectacle unfolding next door. Through her second-story window, Karen counted 43 guests crowded onto the Hendersons' new deck. The tiny bar was fully operational, complete with a blender that she could hear from her kitchen. String lights created an ambience that, she grudgingly admitted, looked almost nice. This is a clear violation of the community's guest parking policy, Karen muttered, photographing the line of cars parked along their street. Maximum of 4 guest vehicles per household event. She'd already called the non-emergency police line twice, once for the noise and once for the parking violations. Both calls had resulted in gentle suggestions that she speak with her neighbors directly. Speak with them? Karen had nearly shrieked at Officer Martinez. They're clearly in violation of multiple community standards. Now, standing at her window in the darkness, Karen watched Beth Henderson laugh at something her husband had said. The woman actually looked happy, relaxed, like she wasn't currently destroying the carefully maintained harmony of Willowbrook Estates. Karen's phone buzzed. A text from Susan, her usually reliable board ally. Great party next door. Wish you'd come over. Susan was at the party. Susan, who'd voted with Karen on every HOA issue for the past 3 years, was drinking whatever tropical concoction Tom Henderson was serving and chatting with people Karen didn't recognize. Another text, this time from Bob. Amazing fish tacos. These guys know how to throw a party. Karen stared at her phone in disbelief. Her entire board was defecting to the enemy camp. She marched downstairs and out her front door, her HOA violation pad clutched in her hand like a shield. The party noise hit her like a wall. Laughter, music, and the distinctive sound of people having unauthorized fun. Karen, Tom Henderson's voice boomed across the fence. You made it. Come on over. Every conversation on the deck stopped. 43 pairs of eyes turned toward Karen's front yard, where she stood frozen under the streetlight. Several people held up their phones. Was she being recorded? I'm here in my official capacity as HOA president, Karen called back, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. This gathering exceeds the community's guest limit policy. A woman Karen didn't recognize started laughing. Then another joined in. Soon the entire deck was erupting in laughter, and Karen realized she was the punchline. Karen, Beth Henderson called out, her voice surprisingly gentle. We made extra fish tacos. Come have one. For just a moment, Karen wavered. The smell of grilled fish and tropical drinks drifted over the fence. Through the string lights, she could see her neighbors, people she'd sent violation notices to, people who'd ignored her calls about grass height and mailbox placement, actually enjoying themselves. But then she noticed the hot tub. Steam was rising from the water, and several people were soaking while holding drinks. The health code violations alone. I'll be filing a comprehensive report with the board, Karen announced, her voice cutting through the party noise. This gathering is in violation of multiple community standards. The laughter died. 43 faces stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. You know what, Karen? Tom Henderson's voice had lost its friendly tone. Maybe you should check your own backyard before you worry about ours. Karen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. What's that supposed to mean? Tom's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, I think you'll figure it out soon enough. Karen Pemberton stood in her kitchen at 6 a.m., wielding a measuring tape like a weapon as she peered through her blinds at the Hendersons' new hot tub. The circular monstrosity sat exactly 18 inches from the property line. She'd already measured 3 times. Her coffee grew cold as she furiously scribbled violations onto her HOA violation pad, the pen nearly tearing through the paper. 18 inches, she muttered, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. The covenant clearly states 24 inches minimum from any shared boundary. The Hendersons' hot tub wasn't just an eyesore, It was a declaration of war. Karen had spent 15 years as Willowbrook Estates HOA president, transforming their sleepy subdivision into a picture-perfect community where mailbox heights were regulated to the quarter-inch and grass length was monitored weekly. Now these newcomers thought they could just ignore the rules. She speed-dialed her secretary. "Marcia, emergency board meeting tonight, 7 sharp. We have a situation." By noon, Karen had already printed 47 pages of HOA regulations, highlighted the relevant sections in aggressive yellow, and prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled Property Line Violations, a Cancer on Community Values. She'd also taken 16 photos of the offending hot tub from various angles, measuring each one's distance from the property line with obsessive precision. The emergency board meeting convened in Karen's living room, where she'd arranged folding chairs in perfect rows. Board members Jim and Susan arrived looking confused, while Treasurer Bob shuffled in carrying a confused expression and a gas station coffee. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, ticking to her first slide, "we are facing an unprecedented assault on everything Willowbrook Estates represents." "Karen, it's just a hot tub," Susan said gently. "Just a hot tub?" Karen's voice rose an octave. "Today it's 6 inches over the property line. Tomorrow they'll be parking RVs in their front yard and raising chickens." She clicked through slide after slide of measurements, property law excerpts, and before and after photos of the neighborhood. By slide 32, Bob was openly napping. "I motion that we issue an immediate cease and desist order," Karen declared. "All in favor?" "Karen, maybe we should just talk to them first," Jim suggested. "Talk?" Karen's laugh could have stripped paint. "Jim, these people installed a hot tub without even submitting an architectural review request. They've shown complete disregard for our established procedures." The vote was 3-1. Karen's iron grip on the board remained strong, though she noticed Susan's hesitation. That would need addressing later. As the meeting adjourned, Karen stood at her window again, watching steam rise from the Hendersons' hot tub in the darkness. Through their sliding glass door, she could see them laughing with friends, glasses of wine in hand, completely oblivious to the storm about to break over their perfectly manicured suburban heads. She pulled out her phone and began typing the first of what would become a very long series of violation notices. Karen woke Sunday morning to the sound of rushing water and a smell that made her stomach lurch. She stumbled downstairs in her robe, following the sound to her kitchen, where a thin stream of brown water was seeping under the back door. "No," she whispered, running to her sliding glass door. "No, no, no." Her perfectly manicured backyard was flooded with 6 inches of sewage. The water lapped against her prize-winning rose bushes and had already killed the grass she'd spent 3 years perfecting. Floating in the mess were things she preferred not to identify. Her phone rang. Tom Henderson's name appeared on the screen. "You might want to call a plumber, Karen." His voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Looks like your main sewer line just burst." "How did you?" Karen stopped herself. "This is sabotage. Actually, it's what happens when you build your deck too close to underground utilities. See, when we applied for our permits, the city inspector mentioned your pool deck was sitting right on top of the main sewer line. Amazing it lasted this long, really." Karen's pool deck, the one she'd built 5 years ago, the one she'd rushed through the permit process to avoid the summer construction ban, the one she positioned exactly 18 inches from the property line. "Your party caused this," she said weakly. "Karen, that sewer line's been compromised for years. All that extra water from last night's rain just finished the job." Tom's voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. "Good thing we moved our hot tub, right? Could have been a real mess over here." Karen ended the call and stood staring at her flooded yard. The irony hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent a week documenting the Hendersons' 6-inch violation while sitting on a major code violation of her own. Her phone buzzed with texts from neighbors, photos of the sewage flooding the common area, complaints about the smell, demands for immediate action. Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down had sent a video of the contaminated water reaching the community playground. By noon, Karen's doorbell was ringing constantly. First came the city inspector, clipboard in hand, and a grim expression. Then the emergency plumbing crew, whose estimate made Karen's knees buckle. Finally, the attorney representing 3 families whose properties had been affected by the flooding. Miss Pemberton, the inspector said, shaking his head as he reviewed the permit files, this deck was never approved for this location. You're going to need to tear it out completely and rebuild the entire sewer line section. The cost? $47,000. Karen signed the emergency work authorization with shaking hands, watching through her window as workers began ripping up her deck, the same deck where she'd held 15 years of HOA board meetings, where she'd planned her campaigns for community beautification, where she'd felt most in control. That evening, standing in her empty backyard amid the construction chaos, Karen heard familiar sounds from next door: quiet conversation, the gentle bubbling of the hot tub, the clink of wine glasses. The Hendersons weren't throwing another party, they were just living. Susan appeared at Karen's fence line, her expression unreadable. The board met this afternoon. Susan said quietly. Emergency session. Karen's stomach dropped. About what? About whether the HOA president should be held to the same standards as everyone else. Susan's voice was gentle but firm. Karen, you violated more codes with that deck than Tom did with his hot tub. I was protecting our community values, Karen said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. No, Susan replied. You were protecting your need to control everything. There's a difference. As Susan walked away, Karen heard Tom Henderson's voice from the other side of the fence. Hey, Karen? The offer for fish tacos is still open. Anytime you want to talk neighbor to neighbor instead of HOA president to violator. Karen stood alone in her destroyed backyard, the smell of sewage still heavy in the air, and for the first time in 15 years, she had no idea what rule to cite, what violation to document, or what meeting to call. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The certified letter arrived at the Henderson house on a Tuesday morning, delivered with Karen's signature precision timing, exactly as Tom Henderson left for work. Karen watched from her upstairs window as Beth Henderson signed for the envelope, her robe fluttering in the morning breeze. Phase 1 complete, Karen murmured, already reaching for her binoculars. Within an hour, she heard shouting from next door. Perfect. By noon, Tom Henderson was standing on Karen's front porch, his face red and the crumpled violation notice clutched in his fist. Karen opened the door wearing her most professional smile and her HOA president badge, a laminated rectangle she'd had custom-made at FedEx. Mr. Henderson, how can I help you? This is insane, Karen. 6 inches. You want us to move our entire hot tub for 6 measly inches. Karen pulled out her tablet, swiping to her photo documentation. Actually, it's 7 3/4 inches at the closest point. I've taken measurements from multiple angles. The community covenants are quite clear on property line setbacks. We spent $8,000 on that thing. Then you should have consulted the Architectural Review Committee first. Karen's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd never made an expensive mistake. I'm afraid the hot tub will need to be relocated or removed within 30 days, or we'll be forced to involve our legal counsel. Tom's jaw worked silently for a moment. You know what? Fine. We'll move it. But this is ridiculous. Karen watched him storm off, but something in his tone bothered her. It was too easy. Too agreeable. 3 days later, she discovered why. The Hendersons' contractor arrived Thursday morning with a small army of workers. Karen initially felt vindicated. They were complying with the violation notice. But as she watched through her blinds, drinking her 3rd cup of coffee, something seemed wrong. Instead of moving the hot tub away from the property line, they were expanding it. Karen grabbed her binoculars and focused on the construction zone. They weren't just relocating the hot tub, they were building an entire deck around it, complete with pergola, outdoor kitchen, and what looked like a tiki bar. Marsha, Karen shouted into her phone. Get me the Hendersons' building permits. Now. The answer came back within an hour. All permits were properly filed, all setbacks were correct, and the new construction would sit exactly 24 inches from every property line. The hot tub itself would be moved the required distance. But the new deck would extend 30 feet into their backyard, directly facing Karen's kitchen window. The tiki bar would block her view of the community's crown jewel, the perfectly manicured common area she'd spent a decade perfecting. Karen stared at the construction chaos, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The Hendersons hadn't just complied with her violation notice. They'd used it as an excuse to build something 10 times more elaborate. "You think you're clever," she whispered, watching Tom Henderson gesture enthusiastically at the construction workers. "But you have no idea who you're dealing with." She opened her laptop and began researching noise ordinances, construction hour limitations, and permit compliance requirements. If they wanted to play hardball, she'd show them what 15 years of HOA presidency could accomplish. Karen's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the inspiration, neighbor. The deck party's next Saturday. You're invited. Tom and Beth." Karen's grip tightened on her phone until her knuckles turned white.